Welcome to Linux Basics for Hackers V2, the new and updated version of Linux Basics for Hackers. From Hackers Arise, as you know, I'm OTW, and our intention over the next 3 days is to cover nearly all of the book. We won't cover all of it, but nearly all of it. We'll try to hit all the high points of the book, the key information that you need. All right, so sit back, relax, and let's get started. First of all, I'm hoping that you have a copy of Linux Basics for Hackers. Yeah, okay, that's a good start. You don't have to have it though, right? I mean, you can follow along in this video without the book. It'd be easier if you had the book. You also should have a version of Kali available, but in reality, this will work with any distribution, almost any distribution of Linux. There's lots of different distributions of Linux out there. Our intention, though, is to teach you Linux from a hacker perspective. So what do you need to know if you're getting started as a hacker and using Kali Linux? What commands are essential? All right, just I could have written a book that was 1,000 pages long, and we all know there's books out there on Linux that are 1,000 pages long. My goal was to condense the essentials into a 200, 250 page book so that it would be more approachable, consumable. Okay. I didn't want to intimidate people by offering everything and anything on Linux. I tried to say, okay, what is it that you absolutely need to know to be able to operate within Linux and operate in a cybersecurity hacking environment? So that's the whole intention of the book. Hopefully, I accomplished that. It's been a very good seller, so I think at least some people believe that that has been accomplished. Okay, let's take a look at what's going to happen for the next 3 days. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show you the course outline. And basically, the course outline is going to follow the book very, very closely, okay, with some exceptions. All right, so we're going to start off with an introduction, and then we're going to cover some basics. We'll then go on to text manipulation. We'll look at networking, adding and moving software, file and directory permissions, process management, using environment variables, bash scripting, compressing and archiving, storage device management, logging, services, anonymity, wireless, loadable kernel modules, and automating tasks. So, okay, Daniel says, no, he cannot hear. Okay. Daniel, you cannot hear. Okay, after a little bit of technical difficulties, we're back in business. So basically, we have like 16 chapters, 16 units to cover in this book. So our plan for the next 3 days is to start at 3 p.m. UTC. We'll run to about 6 p.m. UTC, so about 3 hours. We'll take a 15-minute break in the middle of that. And then at 6 p.m. UTC, we'll take a 1 hour meal break, come back for hour and a half, 2 hours. So you'll get about 4.5 to 5 hours of instruction each day. And I think we can cover it in that time. That means we have to cover about 5 to 6 chapters each day. Right? And I think we can do that, especially at the beginning. The chapters are relatively brief at the beginning of the book, and they get a little more extensive and later on in the book. So if there aren't any questions, let's get started. Okay, let's start off talking about careers for hackers. All right, a lot of people, the general public, when they think of hackers, they think of cyber criminals. Right? And people who are trying to take over their computers and steal their credit card numbers and their identity. And that's accurate. There are some people who do that as hackers. But especially in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a huge expansion of what hackers can do that are legal and legitimate professions. The first one, okay, and the one that most books tend to focus on is pen tester or penetration tester. Penetration tester is somebody who gets paid to try to hack a company's, some institution's systems, trying to find the holes, the vulnerabilities in the system. All right. So they are a good guy hackers, what some people might think, call them, or a white hat hacker. Their job is to find the vulnerabilities before the bad guys do. But we also know that almost every military now in the world has a group of hackers trying to hack their adversaries. The Chinese, the US, and the UK, Iran, and Russia are probably the most active countries in hacking their adversaries. And each of these countries employs thousands, tens of thousands. Uh, Daniel, I'm sorry you lost your audio again. Hmm. These countries employ tens of thousands of hackers, and they're not all working for the military. Oftentimes, they're working for private companies that contract to the military. So, like in the U.S., there's well over 50,000 hackers working for the U.S. government. About half of them are working as employees of the U.S. government. The other half are working for private companies who then contract to the U.S. government to hack other countries, and in some cases hack their own citizens. Uh, Probably the fastest growing area in the last 5 or 10 years is bug bounty hunting. This is a little bit different than pen testing in that in pen testing, the hacker is trying to find known vulnerabilities. So you're not trying to find a 0 day, something nobody's ever seen before. You're saying, okay, let me see if I can get into your system via known vulnerabilities, known holes in the system. Bug bounty is where companies pay people to find essentially 0 days. All right, 0 days. These are flaws in the software and the network that have never been seen before. And they pay bounties, okay, they pay a fee if you find these flaws in their software, in their systems. And some people are earning, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars doing this. Most people are making somewhere in the area of $10,000 to $50,000 a year. The good ones are, but occasionally you'll see somebody who earns just huge amounts of money. So it's a very could be a very lucrative profession. Okay. Also espionage. Every country is using hackers to spy on their adversaries. And then I should add one more category here that you don't see on the screen, and that is that there are organizations that, like VUPEN and the hacker team out of Italy, VUPEN is in France, and there's a number of them in the US that go out and try to develop 0 days, and then they sell them to governments. Okay. Um, VUPEN does very well out of this. They sometimes sell their 0 days for millions of dollars to governments so that governments can spy on their own people or spy on their adversaries. A good example of this is the Eternal Blue, which was 2017, that was sold to the US NSA, National Security Agency. It was used to spy on adversaries and on American citizens. It was developed by an outside contractor who sold it to NSA, and then it was stolen from them and put out on the internet. Okay, and the last category I want to talk about is the InfoSec engineer. If you're working in InfoSec, if you're working in information security and you don't know how to hack, you're at a real disadvantage. The best InfoSec engineers are those who know how to hack. If you don't know how to hack, how can you possibly protect the systems? All right, it's kind of like any sport. Think of any sport, and if you only knew how to play defense, okay, and didn't understand what the other team's offense was, you aren't going to be very good at stopping them from scoring. Okay, whether it be basketball or football, you have to understand how the other team is attending to score before you can stop them. What are their strategies? What are their plans? How do they go about doing? What are their assets? You need to do that in sport, and you need to do that in the world of cybersecurity. You need to know how the other side operates to be able to protect yourself. And that's why this hacking training is so key for anybody who wants to enter cybersecurity or InfoSec. And that's going to be generally going to be the largest category because we're employing millions of InfoSec engineers around the world. And all of them should have some hacker training. So that's who we are targeting. Okay, all of these categories. So no longer is the hacker simply somebody in a hoodie in their mother's basement. Okay, right now hacking has become a legitimate career. Okay, a well-paying legitimate career for millions of people. All right. So hopefully you join those ranks. All right, well, let's get started. Okay, let's start with the basics. I'm going to go ahead and open up my Kali, and we'll talk about some of the basics. If you're using the book, hopefully coming into this class with a setup, okay, of Kali in a virtual box or in VMware, the first couple pages show you how to set it up. Hopefully you've been successful in doing that. I think you guys are. Let me go ahead and open up my Kali. All right. I got a couple of them running here. This is Kali 2023. Okay, so we're at 2021 and I'm recording this. So it's maybe 6 months old. All right. Let's go ahead and open it up. And a few years ago, or about a year ago, the folks at Offensive Security made some changes that are not covered in the book. And that's one of the main reasons for offering this class. We'll be offering a second edition, an updated second edition of Linux Basics for Hackers in the near future, probably next year. Okay. And it looks like my Kali is slow to open up. Let's see what's going on here. Just getting a black screen. Let me just close it down. We'll restart it. And I've got some other things running here. Let's close them. All right. Let's go ahead and restart Kali 2020.3. All right, here it's booting up. I'm running 32 gigs on this system. It runs pretty smoothly. Obviously, not everybody's going to have 32 gigs of RAM. The more you can give it, the better it's going to run. But generally, probably you should have 4 gigs of RAM and a relatively fast processor. Okay, one of the first things that you'll notice, okay, since 2020 came out, is the authentication. It used to be that with Kali, and this is, my book reflects the 2019 and earlier, is that you logged in with root. All right. Now, with the newer version, you log in with Kali, and then whatever password you set up Kali with. I think the default is going to be Kali. Okay, and this is simply a regular user. Now, Like all operating systems, you have privileged users such as root or system admin in Windows. In Kali, you have root and then you have other users. So rather than logging in as root, with 2020 Offensive Security, the developers of Kali have set it up so that you log in as a regular user. This is designed for security purposes. And so that's what we're doing here. We're logging in as Kali. Kali is just a regular user. Okay. Now, once it goes ahead and boots up, all right, the first thing you need to do is to open up a terminal. And there's our terminal. Click on it right there. Okay. You see it reflects Kali here. One of the key differences, okay, we just talked about logging in as Kali now as a regular user, is that to get root privileges, okay, in Kali, you need to use the sudo command, okay, before you run any commands that require root privileges. One of the things I don't like about what they did with Kali is that if you run a command, let's just try like this command, say ifconfig, and we'll get to this in just a minute, but just as an example, ifconfig, you'll use it a lot. I use it a lot. Basically what it does is it gives you the network settings uh, for Linux. If you run it without sudo before and hit enter, it comes back with this command not found. I don't like that. It should come back and say you don't have adequate privileges. All right. But instead, it comes back as command not found. That can be really puzzling for a newcomer. So if I go ahead and go sudo ifconfig, all right, and it asks me for my password, and then it gives me all the information I need. So this is simply, I don't like the way this is put together, but I'm not the one who's deciding it. Other distributions of Linux will often come back when you need root privileges. It'll come back and say you don't have adequate privileges. With Kali, they've designed it and says command not found. That you'll get used to that. Right? You'll get used to it. Know that it's really not an issue of there's no command. It's an issue of you don't have privileges. But I don't like it. So whatever that's worth. So that's one of those key. Those are the key differences with the new versions. Is that you need to use sudo, okay, to get root privileges, and you log in as a regular user. My book does not reflect that. All right, so that's an important distinction, and it can be. And I've heard from readers who've been very confused by that. They've tried different commands in my book, and they've run into problems where it says command not found. Why is that? Why can't I find that command? Why isn't it on my system? Well, if you use sudo before it, that'll take care of it. Okay. So before we take a look at some of the commands in Linux, let's take a look at the file system in Linux. The file system in Linux is really significantly different than you'll see in, say, a Windows system. Okay, this is the file system, or something like it. Actually, this is very similar to what's in the book on page 5. Okay, and at the very top of the file system, okay, you get this slash or this backslash, okay, forward slash, and this is the top of the file system. This would be similar to, say, the C drive in a Windows system, right? But it's not linked to any physical drive. It's just simply the top of the file system. This is one of those things that you need to get adjusted to, all right? Also note, okay, that under root, okay, so don't confuse, this is the root of the file system, and there's a root user, two different things, all right? So this is the root of the file system, and then there's a root user. This would be the directory that belongs to the root user. And there can be, there will be directories for every user. For instance, right? One of the key commands of getting started in Linux is the present working directory, PWD, present working directory. And we can see this is where I am when I boot up. I'm in home Kali, okay? So I'm in the home of the Kali user. It's important to know where you are to be able to navigate through Linux. Let's go back and look at some of the others here. We have the etc directory, okay, etc. etc is generally configuration files, so that every application generally puts its configuration files in the etc directory. Here's the home directory, okay, that we just saw in our Kali. Remember, it was home Kali. So it's home for all the users, and then each user has a directory under home with their things. All right. We have the mount. This is where outside new drives are mounted. In other words, they're attached there. That's where if you put in a outside hard drive or you put in a thumb drive, they're going to mount there. Now, I just said that you would put a thumb drive in there. Quite frankly, most new operating systems now have a separate directory called media, okay, that does, it is a mount place for thumb drives. So there's going to be slight differences between the distributions. We have the sys directory, we have the proc directory. Okay, proc is a view of the internal kernel data. So this is if we go into the proc directory, this is going to give us a kernel's view of all the processes. That's what proc stands for. Sys is a kernel's view of the hardware. Dev is the special devices file. So every device has a file here. Bin is binaries, be similar to executables in Windows. We have SBin or system binaries. And then we have libraries, okay? Libraries are very similar to DLLs in Linux or in Windows, where you have code that applications can use, okay, code they can reuse over and over again. That makes writing code a lot simpler rather than everybody writing code for how to open up a window. You simply call the window library, for an example. But there's lots of code in the libraries, similar to a DLL in Windows. So it's kind of the basic view of what's going on in the file system. The most important things, I think, for starting off is that you need to understand you have the root at the top of the file system, okay? And that's different than the root user over here. And that these are the primary directories under root. And probably the most important ones are going to be the binaries, the device, the mount, the etc, okay, and probably home. So these are all directly under root. So if we were to go, let's go back to our Kali and let's go and move back one directory level. We're introducing the CD command or change of directory, all right? And by going cd ... so move up the directory structure one level. So move from this directory to this directory. If we hit cd, now we're in home, and we can go pwd. You can see we're in home. If we go up one more level, going up one more level from home to root, that's root right there. Let's go cd ... Okay, and now go pwd, and you can see present working directory is the root. We're at the very top of the file system. Now, one of the key commands to learn in Linux is the ls command, the list command. So now that we're at the very top of the file system, we can go ls, all right, and we enter ls, we see all of the directories at the top, okay, just underneath root. Here's root, okay, that's where we're at, and we're saying, okay, show me all the files and directories under root. And you can see here's bin, etc, home, dev, like we had in the diagram, our libraries, okay, several libraries. These are 32-bit, okay, 64-bit. We have a lost and found directory. That's where files that get corrupted or lost get placed there. Here's media, which I was describing. This is where your thumb drives, when they're attached now, will go to media by default instead of mount. You can send them to mount if you want, but by default, they'll go to media now. And we'll cover, if this is, and I'm covering this very quickly, but this is just showing you, get a feel for the directory structure. Okay, you can see I have some applications in the root directory as well, which is not really a good idea. Spiderfoot I have in there. I don't have any others in there. Probably should put your applications in your user's directory. All right, that would be home Kali, right, or whatever your user is. You could name your user whatever you want. Okay. So let's go through some of the basic commands. All right, I mentioned PWD, all right, present working directory. That's a key one to always have a good idea of where you are in the directory structure. All right, you can always type PWD. It'll show you, come back and respond with where you are in the directory structure. Who am I? Okay, is also an excellent tool. Okay, tells you what user you are logged in as. So generally, when you're working in any Linux, you're usually going to have, well, maybe multiple users. So maybe you have access to the root user and your regular user. Which one are you right now? Okay, well, I can just type who am I, and it'll come back and tell me. All right. Then to get around the file system, we just a minute ago had used the cd command. Okay, this is change directory. If you use the command line in Windows, you've probably used cd there as well. And I can go ahead and change directories by simply telling it I want to go, okay, I want to go to the etc directory. All right, cd etc. And it changes to the etc directory. Then once I'm there, I can just go pwd, and you can see it comes back and tells me, hey, you're in the etc directory. You're in the root top of the file system, and then etc underneath the top of the file system. If I need to go back one level, back up to root, I can just go cd and then go ... Okay, ... takes me up one level. Okay, and now I go pwd, and I'm in the root directory again. All right, I could go to cd, say etc again, and let's go and take a look at all the directories under etc. And there's lots of them. These are going to be most of the applications on your system and their configuration files in there. So let's see, let's take an example. Let's use an example. Let's talk about Apache 2. Okay, so we could go and go say Apache 2, change direction to Apache 2. That's our web server. And then go ls-l. We have lots of files in there. But we can go pwd here, and you can see it now reflects in the command prompt that we are in etc Apache 2. We can also then go pwd and get the same response. Now, if we wanted to go back up to the root, we can go cd ... dot dot. This would take us up 2 levels. All right. And now if we go PWD, we've gone up 2 levels. So to go 1 level, we just can do dot dot. If you want to go 2 levels, go slash dot dot. And you can actually do as many levels as you need. All right. Okay. By simply going dot dot forward slash. We looked at the ls command. Okay, ls command simply shows us all the directories and files there. I prefer, and I think most people prefer, using the ls with the -l, all right? And that displays all of the directories and files in that directory, but lays them out vertically with the permissions, and we'll get to permissions later on in class. Okay, these are permissions right here with how many links there are, the owner, okay, and the group, the owner and the group, the date it was created, okay, and then the name of the directory. And if it has an error like this, it says that is a linked, there's a link between user and bin. What does link mean? It's basically very similar to, well, you have linked files in Windows, right? So when you enter bin, you're actually going to user bin, all right? It's a alias. In Linux, they're called aliases, all right? And so we've simply created an alias or a link between bin and user bin. You see there's several aliases out there. Right? Lib is an alias for user lib. Lib32 is an alias for user lib32. These are simply linked files and directories. So when you type one, you get the other. Right? Sometimes it's used just to save on typing, and also sometimes it's the links are created to make it backwardly compatible with other software that might have used that directory or file name. All right. Okay, so lots of good information here. This is the way I prefer to look at my file system and my directories, is using the ls-l. You may choose otherwise. All right. There's also ls-la, which will show you hidden files. All right. So certain files are not meant to be viewed by everybody, and they're hidden. You see a couple of them right here, and cache is hidden. They begin with a dot, and they're not going to show up when you use the ls-l. If you use the ls-la, then they'll appear and you can see them. Sometimes we might need help, right? And there's some conventions in Linux that usually work. Now, there's a lot of conventions in Linux, and usually they work because Linux is developed by volunteer developers. There are conventions, but everybody doesn't have to follow the conventions. And one of those conventions is that there's a help file that's usually the name of the command followed by a -h or a double dash help. Okay, let's try it out and see. So for instance, if we were to want to be able to hack some wireless, the best tool for hacking wireless or Wi-Fi is AirCrack. All right, AirCrack NG is really the tool. I got to spell it right. Okay, AirCrack NG. There's lots of tools out there, but most of them simply are interfaces. They're GUIs to work with AirCrack. AirCrack is a command line tool for cracking Wi-Fi. It's the best, but it takes a little more time to learn. That's why these other tools are out there that use AirCrack. So AirCrack, if we wanted to get help with AirCrack, we go --help. And there's our help file. All right, we'll scroll up a little bit. I'm just using the wheel on my mouse. All right, and here's my aircrack help file. If I wanted the help file for, say, Nmap, go Nmap. Nmap is a port scanning tool. Just do Nmap-H, hit enter, and here's my help. There's a lot of information there. So whenever I'm using something that I'm not familiar with, even if I am familiar with it, there's so many switches and options, we still might want to use the help, to learn a new way, or I forgot. You don't have to memorize all the switches, right? If you use the same switches over and over again, you're probably going to memorize them. But if you don't, you're probably going to have to check on the help screen. All right. There's another way to get help, and that is using the manual command, or man for short. So I could go man and go nmap. Okay, and this will pull up the nmap manual page, and this gives me a lot more information. All right, I can go. I'm just hitting the enter key. Okay, and it's telling me all about nmap. Nmap support is the premier port scanning tool. There's others, but it's been around the longest. Has lots of capabilities. I'm just going ahead and hitting the enter and learning all about Nmap. Now, when I go to Nmap, when I'm using the man file, it is displaying the contents using a text display that requires to exit it a Q. Okay, so it tells me right here, press H for help or Q to quit. So to exit, I go Q, and it takes me right back to my command line. All right. So we can do that for any, say, air crack. The air crack, once again, is the Wi-Fi cracking tool, and it takes me to the manual page. So if the help isn't enough, okay, you can go ahead and use the manual, and usually there's more information in the manual. Sometimes new scripts or new tools will come about and they won't have a manual page. Most of them do, okay? When people develop new tools, they try to create a manual page as well. But sometimes they won't. So sometimes you'll go and look for a manual page and it won't find any, especially if you've just downloaded a new tool. All right, hit Q and leave. All right. Then next, we want to be able to find things. Right? If we're looking for things, we're running this command from a command line. If we want to find particular commands, we have a number of ways that we can do that. Okay. One of the easiest is simply use the locate command. So if we use, once again, using our aircrack for example, just go locate, and it'll show me every place that the word locate appears. These are all the directories and files under aircrack. The aircrack ng appears. This can be really useful, but it also can sometimes be too much information. Right? Maybe what I was really looking for is the aircrack binaries, the executable file. One other thing before we leave locate that I need to point out to you is that locate works very quickly. And part of the reason it works very quickly is that it's accessing a database that's updated every 24 hours. Right? So if you put a new tool in today and you're looking for it with locate, it won't find it. Why won't it find it? Because it hasn't been updated into the database yet. So that's one of the weaknesses of locate. Locate's quick, works great, shows you every place that that keyword appears. But if I was just looking for the binaries, okay, I can use where is. Okay, where is aircrack ng? I'm just looking for the binaries. I don't care about all these configuration files and what have you. Okay, library files. Here you can see there's a manual file. I don't really care about it. I just want to know where is the binary. That's like the executable file. Where is that? So I go ahead and hit where is, and it shows me where it is. There's binaries. The binaries are in user bin, user include, and user share man. Okay. Um, we can also use the which command. The which command is even more specific. Okay. It only returns the location of the binaries in the path variable in Linux. Okay. We'll get to the path command shortly, but the path command exists in almost every operating system. Basically, what it is it says when you enter a command like aircrack, it goes to the path command and it looks in the path command to see where the binary should be. All right. And, uh, and so here, what we're doing is we're going to go and say, which aircrack NG. All right. And then it's going to go ahead and hit enter, and it shows me that the binary in the path command is user bin aircrack. So the path command is used in Windows, in Apple operating system, in Linux, although you may not have used it in those environments. Okay, it's there, but it says when I type something, where should the system look for that command? That's the path command. And we can go ahead just a little bit. Okay, this is a user environment variable. Okay, we can go echo path, and there it is. Okay, so it says, okay, when you type something at the command line, look in first under user local bin, look then in user bin, look in bin, look in user local games, and look in user games. All right, so it'll look in those places for the binaries. If it doesn't find them there, it's going to come back with a message that says command not found. All right. That doesn't mean that you can't use things that are not in the path command. And we'll later on in class we'll show you how you can use other commands, other binaries that are not in those locations. We'll also show you how to expand your path command. Okay, moving on. There's even a more powerful, I'm going to use the clear command, okay, to clear my screen. All right, when I do that, all right, clear, open up some screen real estate. We're going to use another command. This is the find command. Find it takes a little bit more time to understand it and use it. It's more powerful, but it also requires a better and a greater understanding of its capabilities. So we could go, say, find, and then go -H, and it tells me no, unknown predicate. Okay, it doesn't work. Now we said that there's a convention that -H should give you the help screen, but those conventions aren't always abided by. The other convention would be to go find --help, and there's where the help screen's at. Okay, usually one or the other work. Okay, so here's the usage of the find command. There's a lot there, but I'm going to try to boil it down for you. I'm going to go clear. So using the find command, we first of all type the command, okay, and then we tell it where do we want to start looking. All right, so say we want to start looking at the very top of the file system. All right, that means it's going to go through the entire file system, which can take some time because it'll go through the entire file system. If we know, approximate location, we might want to put it in here. But for right now, let's use the top of the file system, and then we can tell it what type of thing that we're looking for. In this case, is say a file. All right. So it's type, and then the dash. I mean, just the F is the type. We're looking for a file, not a directory. All right. And then we're looking for the name. Okay. And the name we're looking for, say, is well, let's look for something different. Let's try Spiderfoot. Spiderfoot is an open source intelligence application. And let's look for it and see if it can find it. And come back and look what it says. It's permission denied, permission denied, permission denied. All right. So this is a good example. This is what I would like Kali to do for all of the commands that require, yet it is finding some that require root privileges. So if we run up arrow, should bring up the same command, and then go sudo. All right. And that should get us root privileges. And there goes, it found a few places, okay, under user bin Spiderfoot, user share lintian override Spiderfoot. Maybe, okay, maybe we have an idea of where it's at. And let's try Etsy. Let's just say we want to look in Etsy. For this case, we're going to change it to Apache 2. And it comes back very quickly. We know exactly where to look. Okay, it was in the Etsy directory, and it comes up with 3 files within the Etsy directory. Remember, Etsy is a directory for largely configuration files. So here's 3 different configuration files for Etsy in the Etsy directory. All right. If we were to back out and say we're going to look through the entire file system for Apache 2, now this is going to be a much larger search. And if we hit enter, it should take a little longer. Yeah. And you can see it came up with a few more files, took a little bit longer, not too much longer, and found a few more files that were not in the Etsy. Okay. So the basic usage of find is the keyword find, where to look, what am I looking for? In this case, usually you're going to be looking for a file. You may be looking for a directory, in case you use D, and then I'm looking for the name, okay, Apache 2. Find actually has a lot of other things that it can do. Let's try, let's man find. Man find. Once again, we're trying to boil this down to the basics, the essentials. There's lots of options. And it can be a really powerful tool the more you know about it. But once again, trying to boil it down to the essentials, most people are going to use it to find files and directories by name. So that's what I've tried to do for you. You see here that you can define the depth to look, okay? The maximum depth levels. But once again, trying to stay with the essentials. Okay. One of the other key commands that you need to know to be functional in Linux is grep. Grep is simply a tool to filter, all right? So if we were to go ahead and say, look for PS lists all of the processes running on the system, AUX, right? That shows me all the processes. But say that I'm not really looking for, I don't want all the processes, and we'll look at process management later on, okay? But say I'm looking for a very specific process. Let's say I'm looking for, see whether or not there's a browser is open. All right, let's go say PSAUX, and then we can go put a pipe in. Now it says a pipe, what it does is it goes and says, take and display, well, go ahead and gather all the information from PSAUX like we have above here, and then send it to another command, and that command will be grep. Grep is a filter now, and say, I want you to filter and just show me where the term Firefox, that would be our default browser in Kali, just show me where Firefox exists. All right. And I find one right here. It's for the coloration of Firefox. Let's go ahead and open up Firefox. All right, let's go and open up our web browser. All right, there's our web browser. Now let's go PSAUX without the filter. And you can see we've now have some, now that we've opened up Firefox, we've got some processes that are associated with Firefox. So now let's try and filter. And this should take out everything except for the Firefox. And you see it did that. It shows me just the lines that include Firefox. So grep is a great and powerful tool that helps you find information when you have too much information. You want to be able to filter for a particular keyword. Great tool for that. And we've learned there that we can use the pipe. Okay, that's this vertical line. Okay, on most keyboards, it's going to be the shift and then the backspace, the backslash. Okay, for me, it's on the upper right side of my keyboard, and most keyboards you're going to find it there. So you often don't use it in other operating systems. It's used a lot in Linux. It allows you to take one command and send it to another command. And that's the pipe. So this is what we right here. This is the pipe right here. It says run this command and then take the results and send it to this command. Right? That's what the pipe does for us. And we use that a lot. Okay, so that's finding stuff, okay? grep is one of those tools that can help us find stuff as well. Let's talk about modifying files and directories. Okay? There's a number of tools. I'm going to clear my screen again. Okay. One of the tools that we can use to create a file is the cat command. Cat is short for concatenate. Concatenate means to take pieces together. Yeah, Steve says touch is one of those places. Yes, we can use touches. We'll get to it. Concatenate is usually meant to display contents of a file. So for instance, cat, I can go etc Apache to Apache. This would be the configuration file for Apache to the web server. I can go cat, and it goes ahead and shows me the entire contents, okay, of that file. But cat can also be used to create files. So I can go cat and then use the redirect and go hacking skills. Okay, that's the name of my file. All right. Hit enter. Okay. It tells me permission denied. So I have to use my sudo cat redirect. Redirect says go ahead and send it, okay, to this location, okay, this file name. So we're creating a file to send it to. And it's not letting me do that at all. Hacking permission denied. Let's go ahead. Permission denied. Won't let me do that at all with the new version. So this would be kind of confusing to somebody who's using my book, because they're no longer allowing us to be able to create files with the cat command. So I'm glad we're doing this right now. So we could create a file by using, say, the command touch. Okay. Well, Steve's suggesting change mod, but that would only be if that file exists. Okay. And that file does not exist, I don't believe. Let's take a look. Okay, yeah, there's no file there. There's no file to change permissions with. All right, so that only works. Steve has suggested that possibly, that I could change the permissions on it. We'll get into permissions and later on in chapter 6. But sometimes you'll get that message if you don't have permissions, and there's no file that yet exists. So what this version of Kali is telling me is that I can't create a file, okay, with the cat command. But that's okay. Right? In reality, few people create files with the cat command. More commonly, we'll use the touch command, okay? And let's go hacking skills. Okay, it tells me permission denied. Let's go sudo hacking skills, sudo touch. There, okay? So to create the file hacking skills, okay, I need to use the sudo, which gives me root privileges, and then touch, right? So touch creates that file. Now if I go ls-l, I should have a file there called hacking skills. There it is, okay? So that's how I can create files. I can create any file I want, all right? And notice permissions here. Now we'll get into permissions in a little bit, but this is read and write for the owner. That's me, Kali. All right. No execute. Read for the group and read for everyone else. We can change those later on when we get into permissions. All right. We can also go ahead and make a directory. All right. So we can go mkdir. That's the make directory command. We're going to need to use the sudo command as well here. Sudo make directory. And let's call it new directory. Okay. Then we can go ls-o, and we should have a new directory called new directory right there. Okay. So touch to create a file. Okay. Make dir to create a directory. And then, of course, we can go ahead and navigate to that new directory. Right. And we do ls-l there, and you see there's nothing there. It's just a brand new directory, so there should be nothing there. Let's go ahead and put something in there. Let's go sudo touch my first file. Okay, and then go ls-o, and there's my first file. We can also use the command copy. Okay, that's CP is copy, same as it is in Windows. All right, let's go sudo copy, okay, my first file, all right, to another directory, say to the Etsy directory, all right. So we're saying, give me root privileges, copy this file to this directory, and hit enter. Now let's go over to Etsy and see if it's there. And let's go navigate up. What's called my first file should be in the M's here. There it is. Okay. Now copy makes a copy. So there still should be the file in the previous directory we copied it from. All right. So, but there's another command called move. Okay, Steve says, can you explain the LN links when you get there, please? Yeah, we could talk about that. I'll talk about it real briefly right now. We'll talk about it more and later. And I think that's one of the things that maybe I want to expand on in the second edition of the book. Basically, I was mentioned earlier, I don't know if you were here, Steve, but when these, you do right here, for instance, there's an arrow right there. This is basically what's called an alias, and it starts with a, and look at the permissions here. The very first letter, this indicates what type of object it is. So, for instance, if it's a file, there'll just be a dash there. If it's a directory, it'll have a D there. If it's a link, it'll have an L. All right, and then it'll show you what it's linked to. You know, in Linux, it's described as an alias, and basically what it is that it's when you enter one command and it takes you to another command. Right? It's very similar, say, in Windows, when on your desktop you have a link to a executable. You click on the link on your desktop, and it takes you to an executable that is then run on the system. In this case, if I run mtab, it's going to take me to proc self mounts. All right. If I enter local time, okay, it's going to take me to user share zone info US Eastern. All right. Does that make sense, Steve? So just is it's a way to make it simpler, okay, rather than having, so for instance, rather than having to navigate or enter that whole directory, okay, that then I can just type local time. It'll go ahead and take me there and do what I want it to do. Right? If I do mtab, it'll take me to proc self mounts automatically. It's usually meant to save typing and also to make the system backwardly compatible, say, to old directory structures. All right. So that's what links are. We'll spend, I'll do a little bit in this class, and second edition of the book, I'll add that as a section to cover in the new version. There's a few things I want to add to this book. It'll be a little bit bigger in second edition. But the idea with the first edition was to get a book out there that'll get people started in Linux right away without being intimidating. Okay? I mean, you literally could write thousands of pages of books on Linux. We're trying to avoid that, trying to make something small, accessible to everybody. Now, once we have a new file, we might want to remove it at some point. Okay, so we can use the rm command. Okay, rm removes. All right. But before we do that, we have another command. I'm going to clear. Okay, this one's the move command, mv. There is no rename command in Linux. So generally what people do is they use the move command. Move can be used to move files from one directory to another, but it also can be used to rename a file. So we have this file out there called my first file. Okay, say we wanted to give it a new name. So we can move my first file, and we can call it my second file. All right. So it says, go ahead within this directory, Etsy, okay, and move my first file to a file called my second file. It's going to be in the same directory. It's just, the move is simply going to rename it. And now I go and look. Let's first of all look for my first file. Go up, and there is no my first file, but there is a my second file. So the move command renames the file. And if you're moving between directories, remember that unlike the copy command leaves the original in place. Move does not. It literally moves it. All right. It moves it to a new directory. So say if I wanted to move that new file, say sudo mv my second file, spell it right, my second file, and let's say I wanted to put it into /home Kali. That is my user directory. I am the user Kali. Okay, and it's probably where I want to keep my new files. I created it here in the Etsy directory, but I probably should keep it in my home Kali directory. So I'm going to move it there. All right, hit enter. It should have moved it. Let's go and see whether or not it still exists. Let's go, I did an ls-l. Let's go up to the M's and see my second file, my nothing there, okay? Let's go over to the Kali directory, go cd, and then /home Kali, okay? Then go, let's look at pwd, all right, that's where I am, I'm in the right place. And now I'll go ls-l, and we should find my second file there somewhere. There it is. Okay. All right. If we wanted to remove that file, we can go sudo rm and my second file. And now if I go ls-l, it should be gone. And there it is. It's not there, so it's gone. All right. If I wanted to remove a directory, it's going to be rm. First of all, you got to start everything off with sudo, not everything, but nearly everything. Everything that requires any root privileges, rmdir, and then new, whatever the new directory name is. Okay. And that'll go ahead and remove the directory. If there's any contents in the directory, let's go ahead and create this directory just for demonstration purposes. Okay, let's go make dir new directory. Okay, okay, and then let's make sure that it's there. Okay, new directory, there it is. Okay, then let's navigate to it. And let's take a look what's inside. There's nothing inside, so let's create a file in there. Go touch, sudo touch new file. Okay, now there should be a file in there. All right, and then let's back up a level. Okay, you can't delete a directory when you're inside the directory. So we have to go outside the directory, and then let's go and remove that directory. So let's go sudo rmdir, and ours is called new directory. Okay, let's try to remove it. It says fail to remove, directory is not empty. All right, so you can't remove a directory where there's something inside of it. So the options you have are that you could remove the contents, or easier, is to go sudo rmdir followed by the -r, which stands for recursive. So it goes inside the directory and deletes whatever in the directory when you delete the directory. So let's go new directory. And it comes back and says, oh, you didn't do that right. So let's go and look at the help file here. All right, things appear to have changed. Okay, --help. And let's see, the options are, here's a ignore, fail, and non-empty. That's a lot longer switch. Basically what the R used to do. All right. So that's one of the changes that's in that new version. Okay. I like the -r better. Okay. It says ignore each failure that is solely because the directory is non-empty. Okay. So let's go ahead and try that one out. Notice that it's much more verbose. All right. Ignore. Okay. Fail. I think the idea here is that they made it much more difficult so that people don't delete files by mistake. So they're really making you have to go ahead and type this all out. It's probably good for security. Ignore, fail, and non-empties. I get that? Did I spell that right? Invalid option I. Oh, it's --. See, right there? I only put in one dash. Usually on single letter switches or options, it's a single dash. When it's spelled out, it's double dash. All right? Usually. There, that time it worked. Steve says, does that include directories? You're talking about subdirectories, Steve? Yes. Yeah, it'll remove everything that's inside of it. Yes. Okay, so that's chapter one. I think that's it. Yeah, just finished chapter one. I've got about 20 minutes after the hour. Let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break, and we'll go on to chapter two and text manipulation. See you then. Okay, we're back to Linux Basics for Hackers. Hopefully you had adequate time to use the bathroom, stretch your legs, get yourself some water, tea, what have you. We're moving on to chapter two now, and chapter two is on text manipulation. All right. So, how do we go? Let's start off by saying nearly everything in Linux is a file. All right. And very often they're text files. Most often they're text files. So, being able to use and manipulate them becomes really crucial. So, let's take a look. Let me clear my screen here. Now notice that I said they're text files. It's really quite different than Windows, right? Where you have, when you want to go ahead and change the configuration of an application, in Windows, you click, 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 click. In Linux, if you want to change the configuration of an application, you go to its configuration file, which is a text file, and you go ahead and simply change some text in that text file. So being able to manipulate text files becomes key. Now let's go ahead and say let's look at a text file. Let's go ahead and use the cat command. Cat is concatenate. We tried using it earlier to create a file and it didn't work. Let's see if we can still use it to display a file. In this case, we're going to use it to display the Apache 2 configuration file. All right. In the book, I use the snort configuration file. Uh, Snort is no longer included in by default in Kali. We can install it, and we will a little later. But let's just right now just use the Apache 2 configuration file, hit enter, and you can see that it displays the entire configuration file for Apache. If we wanted to make any changes to the configuration of Apache, we simply make changes to this text file. And making changes and reconfiguring Apache is way beyond the scope of this class, all right? But there we go. There is the Apache 2 configuration file, simply using the term cat. Notice that I didn't need to use sudo because the file doesn't require root privileges. If I wanted to just see the first few lines of that file, I could use the command head, okay, and then once again the path to the file. Let's go ahead and up arrow, and let's use head, and this head will just show us the first 10 lines, right, by default. If we wanted to see, say, 20 lines, we could use head and then use the dash 20, and it'll show us 20 lines. If we wanted to see the final lines, the last few lines, okay, we could use tail. Okay, so head and tail, all right? So we go tail, and then let's go Etsy. Of course, you could use this with any file. I'm just using the Apache 2 configuration file as an example. Okay, it's on everybody's installation, so it shouldn't be any problems. And oh yeah, I typed it wrong. It should be Apache 2 conf, okay? And then you can see that I got there the last 10 lines of the Apache 2 configuration file. If I wanted to see the last 20 lines, all right, go just add the switch 20 and I get the last 20 lines. Now, as you grow with your Linux use, one of the things that you're going to want to do is check out your log files. And using the tail command can be really useful because it's going to show you the last entries in your log file. So people who regularly check their log files use the tail command to check the last few entries. You don't want to see, the thousands of entries in your log file. You want to see the most recent ones. And so tail becomes really crucial in being able to view those. Also, we can use the NL command. Okay, NL will give us line numbers. And so once again, using the same file, go Etsy, Apache 2, Apache 2 conf, and then hit enter. And you can see now it goes through and displays the file, but with line numbers. Earlier, we learned how to use the pipe and the grep. We can use that now with our text file, okay? So let's go ahead and say with Apache 2 again, except now let's go ahead and grep. We're looking for, say, all the includes, okay, within that file. So this says go ahead and display the file with line numbers and then pipe it, okay, the output, to the grep command and filter for just the lines that have the word include. Hit enter, and we found just one. All right, just one include. Moving on. All right, we can use we're going to look at, this will be on page 23. This is using sed, okay, to find and replace. Sed is a powerful command for manipulating these text files. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and download. We're moving ahead a little bit here in that I'm going to go ahead and download the Snort file, the Snort application, so we can use it. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're connected to the outside world. We should have it natted, and it's not. Let's go ahead and nat, and then OK. And then let's make sure that, see if I can contact the outside world. This is kind of virtual box stuff. Nope, doesn't allow me to. So to be able to contact the outside world, generally what I have to do is I'm going to have to go sudo, and we'll get into this later, DH client, okay, ETH0. What this does is it goes out, and I was connected into an internal network. Now I want to connect to the outside world. This is going to go and get me a DHCP assigned IP address for ETH0, my internet interface. And I got to go ahead and now let's see if I can ping Google. There it is. Okay. When I'm working on the internal network, I have a static IP that only works on the internal network. To be able to contact the outside world, I have to go ahead and get a DHCP assigned IP address so I can operate out over the internet. Now, this is moving into adding and removing software, but let's go and do sudo apt, okay, install Snort. That's all it takes. If Snort is in the repository, that is, the repository is all the software that Kali has stored online. If it's there, that's all I need to go ahead and download it. Snort is the world's most widely used intrusion detection system. And let's go ahead and install it on our system so we can use it for some of our examples. So we go sudo to get root privileges, apt. In the book, I used apt-get. And apt-get will still work, but it's being deprecated, meaning they're slowly discontinuing it. So now we've gone to apt install snort. I could use apt-get. In the book, I use like this, apt-get. They both will work. Okay, but let's use the newer version, just the apt, simpler, requires less typing. Hit enter, and let's hit Y, and it'll go ahead and it'll go to the Kali repository, that place in the cloud where all the software is stored, and get us Snort. And it's going ahead and downloading it all. And let's hit enter, get it all installed. It used to be that Snort was installed by default in Kali. They've stopped doing that. And so now, but they still have it in the repository, so that's good. Go ahead and install it. By the way, I have a class, I have 3 classes on using Snort. So this class, we're not going to be teaching how to use Snort, but we're going to be using its files for text manipulation. So let's go ahead and in the book, I go ahead and we do the use Snort conf. And it comes back and says permission denied. All right, so let's go ahead and there we go. There's our Snort configuration file. And let's, with that same Snort configuration file, let's try cat and displaying it etc snort conf, and let's pipe it. This is right on from page 24 of the book, to grep MySQL. So what this will do is it'll look for instances of the word MySQL within that file. I can see I've made a typo here. Let's go back and fix that. And it tells me, of course, permission denied. So once again, we have to use sudo. And we see two places. Okay, it came back and tells two rule paths where the word MySQL appears. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make some minor changes to that file using the sed command. So let's go sudo, okay, sed. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and change the MySQL within those files. Okay, so we're going to use the -s, okay, S and then the slash, okay, and then we're going to change MySQL. And then we're just going to put it all in uppercase. All right. Remember, one of the things that I failed to point out at the very beginning of the class is that Linux is case sensitive, unlike Windows. Okay, so MySQL lowercase, as it appears here, is different than uppercase MySQL or any case differences. They are entirely different words, commands, files. And then we use the -G, which says change it globally. All right. And we want to change it for Etsy, snort, conf. And then we want to tell it where to change to create this new file that has the uppercase MySQL. We're going to call it the snort2. Okay, so we'll have two configuration files. We're going to have one where it has the lowercase MySQL, and this one's going to have the uppercase MySQL. All right, so we're going to go hit. Now, one of the things that we talked about very briefly before is this is called the redirect. That says send the output to this file. That's what the redirect does. Let's go hit enter, and now, all right, let's go ahead and use the grep command on this file. Okay, let's go ahead and use this up arrow a little bit here. There we go. Except this one, we're going to go and look for the MySQL uppercase from, and we should have stored that in this directory right here that we're in, our current directory, snort2 conf. No such file or directory. Oh, get rid of the right here. There we go. So what I was doing when I looked for it earlier, okay, this says go ahead and look in, start at the root and then go down one directory level and look for this file. And of course, it's not there. It's under home Kali. That's where I stored it at. Now, that's the directory that I'm working in, so I don't have to give it the full path to it. It just automatically says, okay, I'm going to look there first, unless I give it the full path. And then it'll look wherever I want it to look at. Okay? So it says cat snort2 and then grep MySQL, and it finds two instances. We've changed those with the sed command. Okay? Okay, moving on. All right, let's go ahead and clear my screen, open up some real estate here. We've been working with cat and NL to view files, but in reality, they're not very good, okay, for viewing files because they go through and they display the entire file until they come to the end of it. What if we want to read the file line by line? It doesn't really work very good. All right. So we have a couple of commands that actually work much better. And these are the more command, okay, more. So if we wanted to go back to our snort configuration file, Remember earlier when we used the cat command, it just went right to the end and we had to scroll up to see everything. If we use the more command, watch what happens. Cannot open, permission denied. That's what it does because it requires that we have used the sudo command. There we go. So we use sudo before and it displays until it hits the end of the screen. All right, it doesn't go right to the end of the file. It displays until you get to the end of the screen. And it says right down here, it says you're using the command more and you're showing 4% of the file. Now I can just hit enter, all right, and it takes me through the entire file. Much easier to work with something like this for reading, okay? Now, we use the Q to exit, all right, quit, and it takes me right back to my command prompt. More was the first command really to be able to do this in terms of displaying a file just enough to fill up the screen. Later on, we got another command called less, all right? And less does the same thing, but has a little bit more power, all right? So let's use it once again on our snort configuration file. Snort conf sudo, and then we got to use the less command. Very similar to the more command, right? It'll fill up the screen and then it stops, all right? The beauty of the less command is it'll allow me to go ahead and search, all right, throughout the file and replace as well. If we go ahead and use the / we'll go ahead and say, well, let's look at, I just hit the / and then I went, let's type in a search for output, and it goes and shows me where output is within the file, okay? A little more power than you're gonna see in, say, the more command. The more mostly is a display command. Less lets us go ahead and search through the file and find output, any keyword, not just the keyword output. And so oftentimes people say in the Linux world that less is more. It basically allows us to do more than the more command allow us to do. So that pretty much covers the chapter 2. Let's move on to chapter 3 then. I'm still in, as you can see, I'm still in the less command. So I'm going to use the Q, and that takes me out, right? So both the more and less, I can exit by using the Q command. And you'll find that that Q becomes critical in a lot of applications. So whenever you're using the manual file, okay, the man files, the man files are displayed using more. That's why we need to use the Q to exit. So if we go man nmap, for instance, okay, the port scanning tool, all right, what's being displayed here right now is it's the manual page using more. So to exit it, we use the Q, just like we would with man, with more. I'm sorry, with more. Use the Q. Okay, let's move on to chapter 3. Let's go and clear my screen again. Chapter 3 is about analyzing and managing networks. That's a big topic. We're going to try to boil it down to the basics, all right? So probably the most important command is ifconfig. All right. So let's go sudo, of course. So let's just show you if I use it without sudo. We tried this earlier. Command not found. I don't like that. I prefer the permission denied or don't have permission, something like that. But it tells you that it doesn't exist, and it does exist. All right. You just don't have permission to use it. So use sudo ifconfig, and that's interface configuration, if it helps you at all. ifconfig. You may have used in Windows, for instance, uses ipconfig. All right, so very similar. ifconfig, And what it'll do is it'll display for you all of your interfaces, all of the interfaces. In my case, I have ETH0 and ETH1. So I have two interfaces on this machine. You may only have one. Everybody's going to be different. I put a second one on purposely. And it gives me some basic information. Probably the most important information you're going to find here is the IP address. Okay, that's probably the most important information. This is the IP address for that interface. And then the network mask right there, the broadcast IP address, and this is the MAC address, okay, for that interface. The MAC address is a globally unique address that every network device has. Unlike an IP address, okay, the IP address on these internal machines are private IP addresses. We have IP addresses that we use just inside of our network, and then we have routable or global IP addresses that can work on the internet. On your internal network, you use private IP addresses. On the external network, you have the public IP addresses. Those are routable, can find you around the internet. Because of that distinction, we use network address translation devices that take an internal IP address and convert it into an external IP address so you can navigate to the internet. So that when I go out and say ping Google, right, it takes my internal IP address and then converts it to a public IP address so I can connect to Google, right? It's going out with my IP address to the NAT device, converting it into a public IP address, going out to Google. When Google responds, it comes back and does a translation back, okay, to my private IP address. So if you want more on networking, check out my series on network basics for hackers on Hackers Arise. I hope to have a new book out this fall called Network Basics for Hackers that covers these basic concepts of networking as well as how to implement the protocols and the vulnerabilities of each of the protocols. So look for that. Hopefully this fall I'll have it complete. If you're unfamiliar with networking, even if you are familiar with networking, I think it might be a valuable book for you because we're going to take each one of the major protocols and say build an SMTP server. First of all, explain what SMTP is, build an SMTP server, and then look at how it can be hacked. Okay, so that's what that book's going to be all about: is explaining the basics, implementing those protocols, and then how to hack those protocols. So that's ifconfig. That's one of the most important commands that you'll use in networking. I'm going to go ahead and just run it again for you. All right. The most important bit of information is the IP address. All right. That's what we're going to be using most often. So the other stuff's important as well. Most important is going to be the IP address. If there's not an IP address, and this happens using virtual machines, all right, when using virtual machines, sometimes they'll come up and there is no IP address. I showed you just a minute ago how to resolve that, and that is by using sudo, okay, dhclient. That is the DHCP server. So it goes out to the DHCP server, the dynamic host configuration protocol server, which hands out IP addresses, and then you tell it what interface you want assigned, all right? And in this case, ETH0. Now, I also want to point out if you're not using Kali, maybe you're using Ubuntu and others, your interfaces are going to have slightly different names. Okay, we have this split going on now in Linux where we have two different naming conventions of the interfaces. I prefer this one, so I hope that Kali and Debian remain with the ETH0, ETH1. If you're using Ubuntu, you're going to have a different name. You just need to know what the name is. You can copy and paste it, right, and put it in here. So I'm saying, okay, give me root privileges, give me a DHCP address to ETH0, and then hit enter. Tells me file exists. That means it's already done that. Okay. So, but if you didn't have an IP address, that's the way to get it. All right. If I wanted to check on wireless, also it points out here, this is the loopback adapter. Okay. This is your own adapter to your own system. Some people refer to as home. It's 127.0.0.1, right there. That's your home. So if you're testing a new piece of software, say even like we were talking about earlier about Apache, if I wanted to test my Apache server, I can just go to 127.0.0.1. So let's do that just to show you what I mean. So we can go and start. There's a command, and this is one of those things also that's different now in the newer versions of Debian than when I wrote the book. Let's go sudo, okay, systemctl, system control, start Apache 2. This starts the Apache 2 server. All right. So it's give me root privileges, system control, start this service right here, Apache 2. That's our web server. So now if I go to my browser over here and I enter 127.0.0.1, this should give me the Apache server on my system. Oh, look at that. Here's my Apache server. You've won. You've been randomly selected for our drawing. All right. This was part of a demonstration I was doing. But you can see this is my web server. This is the web page, very simple web page, no doubt, on my Apache server right now. You probably come up with the default page if you've done it. This is the way to check to see. This is going to your own system and checking to see if a service is running, an application is running. It's on 127.0.0.1 if you're not familiar with that. All right, that's what this reflects here. All right, my loopback adapter, my home. Okay. So we can also check for wireless adapters, okay, by going sudo iwconfig, and it comes back and says there's no wireless extensions on any of those adapters that you have. We'll come back to this command when we get into wireless, okay, later in the class, and I'll have a wireless adapter installed. Now, it's important to note that I'm running, in this case, VirtualBox, same with VMware, okay, and I'm actually running through a wireless connection to you. But that wireless connection gets piped through a wired connection. It goes from wireless in my machine to a virtual wired connection in my virtual machine. So if I had a wireless connection on my virtual machine, so if I put in an external wireless adapter, it would show WLAN, wireless LAN 0. And we'll do this later on. So even though I'm running wireless on my system right now, because I'm using a virtual machine, it doesn't show any because the virtual machine converts that wireless connection to a wired connection. Hopefully that doesn't confuse you. If you want to run wireless through a virtual machine, you need to have an external wireless adapter that you connect to your virtual machine. All right. So sometimes we may want to change our IP address. So within, say, for instance, if you're doing some testing, okay, you're hacking a system on your local area network, okay, on your virtual machines. Sometimes you might have to change your your IP address. So to change your IP address, you go sudo, okay, ifconfig, and then the adapter, and then the IP address you want to change to. 192.168, say 11. All right. Notice that here's my IP address, and I want to change it to this right here. This would be a static IP address. I can hit enter. Now if I go sudo ifconfig, you can see it's changed. The drawback to doing this is that I've set up a static IP address. So now when I go ahead and try to ping Google, it does not work because I don't have that IP address is a static IP address. It's not assigned by the DHCP server. So when I try to go out to the outside world, it doesn't recognize that IP address and doesn't know what to do with it. All right. So I cannot go to the outside world with a static IP. I can go ahead and set it back by going to sudo dhclient. Just go getting a DHCP assigned IP address, and now I should be able to ping Google. Okay. Okay, so those are a couple of key commands there. Right, using ifconfig to change to a static IP address. I do it all the time when I'm testing. I'm trying to do some hacking on another virtual machine. I have to put them onto a internal network with static IP so I can connect to them. All right, so that's something you're probably going to use sometime in the future. All right, so it's pretty easy for me when I'm working with a hacking, say, a Windows system, and they both are on different networks. I have to change my Kali to put it on the same network as the Windows system. And for me, it's much easier to change the IP address in uh, Linux than it is in Windows because it's just a real simple command in Linux. With the Windows, to change the IP address, I have to go through click, 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 click. Right? In Linux, it's just there it is. I changed my IP address. I don't have to be searching around for, the network connections and then the IPv4 and then the what have you to go ahead and change the IP address in a Windows system. Okay, we use the DH client. All right. Now next, let's clear some real estate again. And one of the things that we can do directly from a Linux system is check the DNS servers, okay, for a domain. So we could the command to use is dig, okay? So we would say we want to check for the DNS servers for Microsoft.com. And there we go. All right, it shows me the name servers, okay, for Microsoft. If I wanted to check for the mail servers, I could use the MX. And it shows me the mail server right here. Okay, so that's a dig command. Dig command can be really useful when you're doing reconnaissance on a target. If I wanted to change my DNS server, my DNS, the one that I'm using, right? I need to use a file called resolve.conf. Now remember that everything is a text file in Linux, right? So all we got to do is get the text file, make some changes to it, and then save it, and then everything changes. So for instance, in this version of Kali, the text editor, the GUI-based text editor is called Mousepad. All right, let's go sudo Mousepad. In the book, I use LeafPad, which was the default GUI text editor at that time. It's changed now. This one is Mousepad. So if you go up here, you want to see that if we go to text editor right here, That is mousepad. They don't call it that, but it's just mousepad. So we can call that mousepad by simply using the command mousepad and then the file that we want to manipulate. In this case, let's go ahead and we're going to manipulate etc resolve.conf. All right. And there it is. It tells us what name server it's using. Okay. And we can change that, okay, to whatever DNS server we want. In this case, it's using 192.168.100.1, right? And all we need to do is to change these values here, all right? So I want to use a different DNS server, all right? And then just save it. And close it, and then my system will now look to 75, 75, 75 for DNS services. Really simple. Before there was DNS, of course, DNS, I should probably explain that DNS is domain name service. I have a tutorial on Hackers Arise that explains the ins and outs of DNS and how you can build your own DNS server and what the vulnerabilities of DNS, how it's been manipulated and hacked in the past. So DNS is one of those key services of the internet. So we don't have to type every IP address in. We can simply type in a domain name, it translates it into an IP address and takes us where we want to go. All right. Before there was DNS, I'm going to go ahead and put this one back to what it was before. Okay. 192.168.100.1. Okay. Matter of fact, I'm just going to close it. Do I want to save the changes? No, don't save the changes. All right, so my DNS hasn't been affected. But before there was DNS, there was a host file. And host files exist both in Windows, Mac, and Linux. You probably haven't used it before, but as a hacker, you might want to. All right. So a host file allows you to essentially create your own DNS server, but you have to enter every domain and every IP address. It essentially works the same as DNS. And for instance, I have a tutorial on Hackers Arise on how to get people on your local area network to be redirected to your web server. So if you put up a malicious web server, you can get everybody on your system directed to yours. And you can do that using the host file. That's why this is kind of important. So let's go sudo mousepad etc host. This is the host file. The host file is actually the first thing your system looks to when you type in a domain. It looks at a host file first and checks to see whether or not there's any entries there. If there are not, then it goes out to the DNS. So it supersedes the DNS. That's a good thing. You can use that to your advantage. Okay. So whenever I enter localhost, it goes to 127.0.0.1. If I enter Kali, it goes to 127.0.1.1. If I look for webscantest.com, it goes to this IP address. Yours probably don't. Yours are only going to have these first two. These were part of a tutorial I was doing, okay, for Hackers Arise. So in this one here is what I was using to redirect people, okay, who entered bankofamerica.com, okay, to this particular IP address. So in this way, I was using it to redirect folks who on my local area network who want to go to bankofamerica.com, and instead of taking it to Bank of America, it goes to my web server. That can be, very malicious. So anything you put in here is going to supersede the DNS. your system will check your host file first. All right. So let's go ahead and let's try some of these out and see what happens. Okay. Let's make sure I have outside access. Ping Google. Okay. Now, what happens if I go to my, all right, if I go to, let's go say, make sure that DNS works well. Let's go Hackers Arise. Okay. Proxy, I got a proxy on here. Let's turn off my proxy. Go here. So I was using it for some web app hacking. And let's turn off no proxy. Go OK. All right. And then let's go back to Hackers Arise. And so DNS takes me to Hackers Arise. All right. I don't have to enter the IP address. Okay. But let's say that I go and say, I want Kali. Kali was one of those entries in my host file. Okay. I think Google went and searched for it. Let's go localhost. Localhost. That should take me to 127.0.0.1, and there it is. See, localhost is a entry that's translated into 127.0.0.1. Let's go back to our mouse pad. I'll show you. Etsy hosts. All right, so there it is. Localhost gets translated into 127.0.0.1, which is my loopback adapter, which has Apache 2 running on it. All right. Let's try entering Bank of America in my browser. Okay. Bank of America.com. It's trying to find it, it's looking for that IP address right there, and it's going to come back and says it can't find it because it isn't on my local area network. Normally, it would go right to Bank of America, but it's hanging there because it can't find it. It's using this entry instead of DNS, all right? Because it goes to your host files first. So you can put anything you want in here. And it's just hanging, can't find Bank of America. Now, if I were to go ahead and comment this out, let's do that. Put a comment before it, and then save it, okay? And then ask for Bank of America. It should go to the real Bank of America site. Eventually it will. Let's stop it and try again. Okay, let's go Bank of America.com. Sometimes the internet's a little bit slow. I'm teaching class because all the bandwidth is being used up by GoToMeeting. You may have to trust me on this one. It's taking such a long time. We'll let this one run in the background. Okay. All right. Let's go and do a Control C out of there. Let's go and clear. That completes chapter 3. We're already on chapter 4. All right. Now, chapter 4 is downloading and installing software. All right. And this is one of those places where things have changed slightly from the time I wrote the book. Okay. And that's why we're doing this class. So, one of the things that we might want to do is to check to see whether or not a particular piece of software is in the repository. All right. So, once again, using the command sudo, we can go apt cache search and look for, say, Snort. So this says, give me root privileges, look in the cache. The cache is a place on your computer with a list of all of the software in the repository and search for the word Snort. Let's hit enter, and it's going through and looking for, and it finds all of these entries within the cache. Okay, it's not actually going out to the repository, it's going into a cache within your computer to see whether or not that particular piece of software exists, and it comes back with several entries, many of them. Okay, so we know, okay, if we want to add Snort or any of these others, we can do that. Right, earlier we had installed Snort, so go sudo. Now, in the book, I use apt-get. All right, they both work. Let's just use apt-get just to show you. Apt-get install Snort, or whatever the software happens to be, and it works equally well. Okay, the industry is moving to just apt, which anytime you can save yourself a couple of keystrokes, that's better. Okay, you can see apt works just as well. We've already installed Snort. Okay, we could go ahead and remove Snort. Go sudo apt remove Snort, and we'll hit yes. We want to continue. Yes, and it goes ahead and removes it. One of the things that it will not remove are the configuration files. And so if we wanted to remove even the configuration files, we should use the term purge. Once again, in the book, I used apt-get, which was the standard at that point. Now, they both will work. Okay. Eventually, in the future, you might find that apt-get doesn't, but the industry has moved to apt. All right. So that removes purging configuration files. Right. So if you just use remove, it removes all the binaries and others. It will not remove the configuration files. You use purge, it'll go ahead and get rid of the configuration files as well. Okay. Generally, every so often, okay, we might want to go ahead and update our cache. All right. So as new files come in and leave the repository, our cache has to be updated to give us a current view of what is in the repository. And we can do that by going sudo apt update. What this does is it goes up to the repository, checks what files are in there, compares it to your cache, and then updates any new entries. Let's go ahead and do that. It takes a little while. So it's going through, checking the repository, seeing what files are there, what applications are there, and it's going to update your list, your apt cache. So you're going to have the most, it didn't take that long. Okay. So went ahead and updated your list. So now you have the most current list of what's in the repository. Sometimes I find it useful, actually most times I find it useful to include other repositories other than Kali's repositories. Why? Because Kali's repositories largely include only information security hacking types of applications. Sometimes we want some things that are not going to be in that repository. And so oftentimes what I'll do is I will change my system so that it can look in other repositories other than just Kali. Right? And the way to do that is to do this. Go sudo mousepad, and then we can go to etc apt, okay, sources list. And what this is once again a text file that tells the system where to look for software, right? The repository to look for software. And here you can see there's only one line, all right? It's looking in the Kali.org, Kali rolling, main, contributed, non-free, okay? We could go ahead and get the source files by going ahead and taking out this comment here. And we might want to go ahead and also get, say, the repository for Ubuntu. You can go ahead and let's go over, let's go here. It never got to Bank of America for some reason. Let's try one more time. Looks like it's working now. There it is. Okay. So once going back to what we were talking about earlier, once I commented out the Bank of America entry in my host file, now my system will go out to the DNS server and find Bank of America for me. As long as I had that IP domain mapping in my host file, it was looking on a local area network for Bank of America. Now it goes out to the internet and finds the Bank of America site. All right. But I might want to use another repository. Ubuntu is a good example. Ubuntu has very large repositories that you can, just because you're using Kali doesn't mean you can't use Ubuntu, right? They're both based on Debian, so they're very similar in their structure of Linux. Let's go ahead and look at, fine, let's try to do a Google search for Ubuntu command line repository. The reason I'm specifying command line is that Ubuntu actually has like a GUI based repository. And let's try here, repositories for Ubuntu, their wiki. And basically it's telling you what we're doing here. Go to etc apt sources list, okay? And then here are the lines that you can add, okay, to go ahead and get the Ubuntu repository. So like right here, I can go ahead and add this, okay, to my sources list. Let's go ahead, here it is right here, and paste it in place. And now it'll look here in Kali first for the software. And if it doesn't find it, it'll go to Ubuntu and look there for my software. So it gives you a wider variety of software repositories to find what you're looking for. I usually keep the Ubuntu in my sources list because sometimes when I'm doing things that aren't necessarily, or for instance, recently I've been working on the network basics book, right? And there's certain applications, network applications, like say an SMTP server. Okay, that might not be in the Kali repository because why would you need an SMTP server if you're running Kali? When I say that, I'll point out that Exim is built into Kali. Okay, Exim, the SMTP server. But if you want to use a different SMTP server like Postfix or SendMail, it's not going to be in there. But it will be in the Ubuntu. So That's how you go about changing it. All you have to do then is go ahead and say save. Okay, simple text editor change. And now when you go and download software, it's going to include not only the Kali, it'll go to Kali first and then go to Ubuntu next. All right. Some of you may want to go ahead and download software, and sometimes this is one of those areas where a GUI might be useful, is to go ahead and use, there's a GUI installer that we can put in, and this one's going to be at sudo apt, and there's several, install Synaptic. Okay, Synaptic is a GUI-based package manager. Let's hit yes. All right. And then Synaptic, should be able to just type in Synaptic now and it'll run it. So how about sudo Synaptic? All right. And now what we have is the software in your system is organized in so-called packages. The package manager enables you to install, to upgrade, or to remove software packages. Okay, you can read the rest of it. It says note, changes are not applied instantly. At first you have to mark all changes, then apply them. So this is our package manager. So unlike the command line, okay, what it does is it goes and shows us, all of the packages. So for amateur radio, these are all the packages that are available for amateur radio. Okay. For communication, these are all the packages available for communication. If we wanted to go, say, databases, click on databases. These are all the databases that are available. Okay. Notice here's Maria. That's one of the changes that's also taken place, is that MySQL is now called Maria, or it's inside of our Kali. It's now called Maria. There's actually now two different databases, one called Maria and one called MySQL, which are basically interchangeable. The distinction between them is that one is owned by Oracle and one is owned by the original developers of MySQL in Sweden, who've now created their own database that is essentially a clone of MySQL. And there's some Postgres in here, some non-free databases. Some development tools. So this, the usefulness of a GUI is that it kind of can lay out everything that's in that particular repository for you. So email, so you get a better idea of what your choices are this way. And then, of course, if you wanted something from here, say, for instance, let's go to Python programming language. Let's try that. Okay, here's some of the choices. Lots of tools, with descriptions over here. Let's see what tools they have. Here's a Faraday, the Collaborative Penetration Test IDE. Okay. You can get a screenshot, get a change log. So if I just double clicked on it, okay, pulls up this here. The chosen action also affects the other packages. So I'm going to say I want to get the Faraday, mark it. All right. shows me down here 7 to install, upgrade, 0 to remove. Okay. And then I can just simply apply, and it'll go ahead and do the install for me. Okay, our Faraday is now installed. Now let's go over here and look at development tools. Okay, let's see if we can find it here. Let's see, post forensics reporting. Where would they have put it at? Let's see. They used to have a development category. And now this is all of the applications. I just clicked on all applications, and there's Faraday right there. If you ever wonder what's built into your Kali, you can see a list of everything in there, even the ones that don't fit into these categories. And there are a number of pieces of software that don't really fit well into these categories. And of course, if you don't know what they are, you can always go to the man page or do a help for any of them. Here's Mimikatz for those of you who are one of my favorite tools. Here's Mimikatz. Mimikatz is a post-exploitation tool that'll go ahead. So this is, it'll get the passwords in plain text off a compromised system. So once you've compromised the system, it'll go in and get all the passwords out in plain text for you. Yeah. So this is a Synaptic, the package manager. It might be a little more useful if you don't know what software is available to you. Especially if you're starting out new, you might be a little surprised at how much free software there is. Okay, there's a lot of software out there. Here's our Apache that we were using. It's already installed. When it has this little arrow next to it, that means it's already been installed on the system. But there's a lot of other stuff out there. All right. All right, let's go ahead and minimize that. And the last thing in terms of installing software is I want to show you is how to use Git clone. Many times new tools will come out in Git, in GitHub. And what you can do to get those tools is use the sudo git clone, okay? And then the address, the location, the URL to where the tools are at. So let's go and back to our, and let's go to GitHub.com and let's say Bluetooth. See if there's any new Bluetooth tools. All right. Here's a Bluetooth cross-platform Bluetooth API. Here's one here. Bluetooth support. Sputnik Development Bluetooth Manager. So there's lots of things in there. One of the tools that we'll use later on, okay, is a Bluetooth utilities called BlueEZ. Let's go BlueEZ. What we'll need in the Bluetooth section, here it is right here. All right, this is BlueEZ. There's a whole bunch of tools for managing Bluetooth. So what we can do is if we want to install these tools on our system, we can go ahead and just simply copy and then go git clone, and then paste. Okay, so this will go ahead to go to the GitHub site, to this directory, and download the tools that are available there. Let's go ahead and do that. And it's going ahead and getting me all the Bluetooth tools that are in that particular directory. Oftentimes when we're talking about new tools or tools that are not included in the package manager for Kali, this is the place to get them. And see how quickly I just downloaded and probably created a directory called BlueEZ. Let's look. Yep, there it is. And there's all the tools, okay, for BlueEZ. BlueEZ is kind of one of those package tools that you need to really do any kind of work in Bluetooth and Bluetooth hacking. So pretty simple to get. It's not, I don't know, let's just quick check and see whether it's in the repository. Sudo apt install. It might be in the repository as well. Oh, Kali, let's check and see. Yeah, it says it's already newest version. Okay, so it is in the repository also. It used to not be in the repository. It is now, so you can get it either one of those ways. So you can get it from going ahead and going to the repository or going directly to the GitHub site and download the package from there. All right, that completes Chapter 4. We're rolling right along, okay? Chapter 5 is coming up, and this is a key chapter on file and directory permissions. We were looking earlier, and we could see here that these are all the permissions, okay, on the different files and directories. And so that's what we're going to be doing when we come back from our meal break. So let's go ahead and break now. I've got a quarter to the hour. It'll be quarter to 6 UTC. Let's come back at a quarter to 7 UTC, and we'll continue on with Chapter 5 and on permissions, which is a really crucial chapter, and Chapter 6. We should be able to get 5 and 6 done, and we'll be well on our way to completing Linux Basics for Hackers. So have a good meal break. We'll come back in 1 hour and continue on. Thanks. Welcome back to the second half of day 1 of Linux Basics for Hackers. When we left off, we were about to get into file and directory permission. This is a fairly important section of Linux. This is where we are able to control who has access to a particular file, who can execute a file. And so one of the things that we need to talk about first, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, is that there are different users on Linux, just as there is in Windows, though you may not, if you're using it on your own home laptop, you may not be aware of that. There's a system administrator, which is called root in Linux, and then there's other users. The other users have more limited permissions. The root user has unlimited permissions. They can do anything. And so based upon these different permissions, we can set up in the file system who can access what in terms of files and executions. Let's go ahead and throw up a notepad here so we can kind of demonstrate some of these concepts here. All right, here's our notepad. And I'm going to move that off to the side, and then I'm going to go back to Kali. All right, and I'm going to do a directory listing. And you can see the directories here. And for the permissions, ignore the very first letter. All right, so for instance, this is a dash here. Remember, the dash means that it's a regular file. A D means it's a directory, and an L means that it's a link. All right, so we've got these letters here. Here's one that has, well, let's see if we can find one that has all of them filled in. I don't see any of them that do, but you can see that these first three here, this triplet here, these permissions represent read, write, execute. All right, so this means that the user who owns this file can read it, write it, and execute it. The next triplet, this triplet here, is for the group that they belong to. And this would mean that they have read, no write, and execute permission. And then everybody else has read and execute permission, but no write permission. Those are the three groups. So we can go, let's put up in our notepad here, and we have three sets of permissions. We have read, which is R. We have write, which is W. And we have execute, which is symbolized by the X, right? So if we wanted to check on any file's permissions, we can simply go and do the long listing. All right, let's go and change to another directory. Let's go back to our home Kali directory and do a long listing there. And you can see there's a number of files and directories here. And we can take any one of those files. And there's some of them that, these are some web hacking sessions here that I've created. All right. And for me, being Kali, the Kali user, I have read, write, but no execute permission. And read, and the group has read permission, and everybody else has read permission, but they can't write or they can't execute those. So remember that this represents the owner, Kali, and this is the group. Over here, we have this is Venmo OS int. Root owns it, and the root group has access to it. All right. Most of everything on my system is either the Kali user or the root user in the Kali group, the root group. Okay. We can change the ownership of a file. So say let's go and here's one right here, Twint. Let's change the ownership. Let's see, we can use the sudo change own, right? And let's see, what do we want to do here? Let's just do a file. Let's do Tesla results right here. Let's use this one. And let's go change the ownership of Tesla results. Copy and paste. And let's change it to root. Invalid user Tesla results. Let me change that. Oh, my bad. I put them in the wrong order. This should be change order root Tesla results. There we go. So those Tesla results now that were owned by Kali, let's go back and check. And Tesla results are now owned by root. All right, they had been Kali before. We can do the same thing with the group as well. So we could go, once again, use your sudo first and change group. All right, you can see the Tesla results are still in the Kali group. Let's change this group to root as well. And we copy and paste Tesla results. And now let's do an ls-l and look for those Tesla results. And they are both have been changed from Kali to root. All right. So let's talk about changing permissions here. So here's our Tesla results. Let's once again stay with the Tesla results. Could be any file though. And we're going to go ahead and change the permissions. Right now, we can see that root doesn't have execute permissions on it, and everybody else has read permissions. We just go ahead and change those permissions. But before we do that, we have to talk a little bit about how permissions are represented in Octal. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me bring up my notepad again. All right, so let's think about these permissions this way. They are read, write, execute. That's the user, okay, or the owner, okay? And then let's go on here, and then we have the group, and they have read, write, execute, or X. And then, so this is going to be the group. And then everyone else, let's call it all else, and they have read, write, and execute permissions. Now, you also know that everything is represented in your computer in binary code, right? So, for instance, a byte is simply a bunch of zeros and ones, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be a byte. And if I switch this switch on right here and put a 1 there, okay, this in decimal, this is equal to 0, of course. But if I were to change it, this one right here, to 1, then in decimal it becomes 1. If I were to change the next one to 1, right, the next bit, now that represents 2 and 1, because this is the 2's place, this is the 1's place. So this now represents 3 in decimal. If I were to go ahead and turn on this switch, now this is the 4's place, so it's 4, 2, and 1. That's 7, right? All right. So if you understand that, now think of these like this. Think of it as your permissions like this, as R, W, X. That's essentially what they are. And they can be represented so that if all the permissions are on, that means all the switches are on, the decimal equivalent is going to be 7. If, say, there's only, let's say, only read permission, that's going to be 4, right? If there's read and write permission, that's going to be 6, okay? 4 plus 2 plus 0 is 6. All right, so we can represent these permissions numerically. Right? So this means that if there was the permissions were read, write, and no execute, that's going to be equal to 6. All right. If there were all the permissions, read, write, execute, that's going to be equal to 7. Right? Just like if we did it up here. If it was just execute permissions, so if it was dash, dash, x, that's going to be equal to 1. Follow me? I hope so. So we can represent then these permissions numerically. And we can do that by using the change mod command. All right, so let's go take these off the screen and let's talk about, once again, that Tesla results here. All right, Tesla results, let's change it so that everybody can execute it. All right, so we could go sudo change ch, right, and then mod, chmod, and then if we wanted to give all the permissions to everybody, right, all the permissions are 7, so we'd give them 7 for the owner, 7 for the group, and 7 for everyone else, right? Except let's put them all together, and then we'll call it, once again, as Tesla results. So we'll change Tesla results. Now, note before I hit the enter that here's the permissions right here. This is what they look like now. All right, so we're going to change the permissions, hit enter, and then do ls-l. And now the Tesla results, where are they? Oh yeah, right here. Notice it changed colors, right? Change colors because now it's executable, all right? It's green. And so now we can see all of the permissions are available. If we wanted to say, just let the user execute, and then the group and everyone else to read and write. So that would be read and write would be 1 and 3, right? Probably not. Probably we wouldn't want them to have write permission. We probably want them to have read permission, which is 4. Let's just do 4 for each of them. That would be 7, 4, 4. That means that the owner, me, I'm going to have all permissions. But everybody else is simply going to have read permissions. So let's go ahead and do that. And oops, I forgot to change mod. All right, change mod. All right, and I must have spelled that wrong. Tesla. Yeah, it should be an underscore. My bad. There we go. Tesla results. Now we do ls-l. We can see that we've changed the permissions on it. Right? So now only the owner, me, Callie, can execute. The others two can just read. Hopefully that's clear. Okay. If it's not, let me know. And in the book, you can see that we've done this, several different examples there. All right. We just try one more, just for sake of experimenting, getting more familiar with it. Let's see. Let's try. Well, we created a. Why don't we create a new file? So let's go sudo touch, right? Sudo touch, and we'll call it new file, right? New file. And then when we go and take a listing of it, we can see our new file. Let's take a look at what. There it is, new file. So by default, okay, the person who created it, the owner, has read and write. Okay, that's 644. 644. That comes, the way we think about that is that's the, like, what's called the default permissions mask. That means that every new file that you create is going to have those permissions by default. All right? It's going to be the permissions by default. And so if I want to go ahead and change that new file, give it different permissions, I can once again just use the change sudo change mod, and we'll call it, let's go 755, a new file. This would give me, Callie, the user, gives me all permissions, gives everybody else the read and execute permissions, 4 and 1, but no write permissions. So they can't change the file, but they can certainly read it. Let's see, is there anything else in here we want to go over? Just quickly scanning. I think we've covered everything. There's a few other things in here, but I don't think they're that important. Oh, one other thing we do want to look at is the UGO method, changing permissions with the UGO method. And so this is a system that rather than using numeric system, it goes ahead and uses more symbolic permissions. So for instance, let's go back to, let's stick with our new file and change the permissions on it. So let's go and do ls-l and look at our new file. Okay, here's our new file. You can see all the permissions for the owner, read and execute for the group, read and execute for everyone else. Now, UGO allows us to be able to change permissions without using the numerical method. So what we can do is we do it this way. We go sudo change mod, right? But now we can go ahead and do this. We can go and by symbolically, we can represent the user as U, and then minus, say, execute. So that would be, we want to change the user's permission and take out execute, and then say new file. Now when we go ahead and look at it, we should see, go back to new file, and you can see the execute permission has been taken out for the user. Let's take out the execute permission for the group. All right, so we can go change mod and now go group, all right? Take out the X, all right? And of course, we can also add in permissions too this way. Group add, go plus X. All right, or we could go sudo group plus. Notice that, remember, a new file, there are no write permissions. We could add the write permission for the group. Now, let's go back and look at it and see what our permissions look like. And our new file right here. So we added the write permission right there. And we took out the execute permission for the user. We added write permission for the group. Okay. So that's the UGO method, whatever works best for you. For some reason, the numeric method works best for me. We can kind of quickly go through the numerical equivalents. So all permissions is going to be equal to a 7, okay? Just the read permission, that's going to be equal to a 4. Just the write permission, that's going to be equal to a 2. And execute, like we said, is going to be equal to a 1. And then you simply sum the permissions. So if I want read and execute, it's going to be a 6. When it's all permissions, it's always going to be 7. Notice that read and write are both even numbers. So if the permissions are odd, 7, 5, 1, 3, okay, that means there's execute permission there, okay? Always if it's an odd number, that means execute permissions are available, okay? Because you can't sum read and write together in any possible way that comes out to an odd number without the execute permission. All right. Any questions on that, folks? I think that's fairly important. So hopefully you grasp that. If not, let me know. Let's move on then to chapter 6. And chapter 6 is process management. We did a little bit of this earlier. We looked at, well, first of all, processes are all of those things that are running in the background in your system. There's all kinds of processes running all the time, all right? And we may want to be able to manipulate them. First of all, we want to know what they are. We may want to change them, manipulate them, stop them, what have you. So if we wanted to simply look at the processes, we can go PS, that's the command, processes. and you see it just comes up with 2 processes. Why? Because it's the processes that the user, okay, me, all right, Callie, has initiated. If I want to see all the processes that are running on the system, I can go PSAUX, and now I see all of the processes that are running on the system. You can see there's quite a few. Let's go to the top of the screen and see what the columns mean. All right, so you can see here's the user, okay, the process ID, what percentage of the CPU they're using, what percentage of memory they're using. I'm trying to remember what VSC stands for. I'm spacing out on that one. The terminal that they're using, when it started, the time, and the command that initiated it. All right. I'm not remembering what these 2 stand for. Let me do a quick Google search. All right. Let's see if I can find out from Google. Virtual memory size. That's what it stands for. Virtual memory size. So it's how much virtual memory is it using? And then the RSS is a resident set size. It shows how much memory is allocated to that process. Okay, so that kind of gives you the breakdown of what's going on there. Generally, what you want to know, most importantly, is the user, probably the CPU and the memory, when it started, and the command. Those are probably the most important features there. Now, earlier we talked about using the grep command. So we can use, once again, the PS shows us a lot of information, probably more than what we want. So we can go ahead and filter this by using grep. And earlier we had processed or grepped for Firefox, right? And we can do that again and see all the processes that have Firefox in their name, and there's quite a few. Or we could grep for, I think we have Apache still running, right? Apache 2. Yep, there's quite a few processes there associated with Apache 2. Shows me the user. Notice that the user is www data. Okay, so anything that's running on the Apache server is being run by that user. Notice this one right here is Kali, and that's essentially just the search that I just did for the Apache 2. It says, okay, yeah, there's Apache 2 included right there in that search. Okay, so it shows me grep color auto Apache 2. That's just basically it sees that as a process that I have started when I typed it. Okay. So that's a good way to be able to find the various processes. Now, also, probably more useful is trying to find out what processes are using up all of your resources. Now, this is a lot like Task Manager in Windows, but so we can have the command called top, okay? And top is a live, dynamic, unlike PS. PS is a snapshot. Okay, top is dynamic, and what it's doing is it's updating periodically on what's going on in your system, showing you what's using up your resources. And if you watch it, you can see it's updating constantly. Okay, Steve, see you tomorrow. Steve has to leave. So it's constantly updating, showing me the process ID, the user, okay, how much memory it's using, how much CPU, the time, all right? So that's really useful if you're managing a system and you want to be able to see what's using up your resources. Also, I'm going to go ahead and Q out of that. Okay, so just Q stops it. Also, there's a what's called a process priority, which is called NICE. Right? NICE allows you to prioritize, or at least suggest a priority for a particular process. And NICE values run anywhere from -20 to +19. By default, processes are set at 0, which is like right in the middle, right? They're set at 0. So we can go ahead and change the priority of a process by using the NICE command. So I can go NICE, all right, and -n, and then we go -10. Now that's not, the highest priority is going to be -20. So this is going to be, I just want to raise the process just a little bit to give it a higher priority. And then, oh, let's pick out a process from above. Okay. Oh, how about our user bin Apache? Okay. Let's go user bin Apache 2 and hit enter, and permission denied. And it also tells me there's no such file. Let's see. Let's go back and check that. User sbin, my bad. Okay. So first of all, we got to use sudo and then nice. And then we want to increase this priority, not all the way to 20, -20, but to -10. I know it seems kind of strange that higher priority means a lower number. So -10 and then user sbin Apache 2, and still telling me invalid option. Oh, geez, I spelled everything wrong on that command. Let's try that again. All right, sudo nice user, get the user, I spelled wrong. sbin Apache 2, hit enter, there it is. Default runtime must be a valid direct, absolute or relative value server root. Configuration of variable, Apache run directory is not defined. So it's not going to work on that one because that is set within the Apache service. Let's say that we have, let's just call it a slow process. Okay, we wanted to speed it up. We can go ahead and speed it up by going and just hitting sudo nice -10 user sbin slow process. And this basically is a suggestion to the kernel. It's not definitive. The kernel still makes the ultimate decision about what gets priority. But it says, if there's additional resources, please consider our slow process to be able to give it a higher priority. Because remember that the kernel is going through many, many processes and basically time sharing, time slicing to each one of those processes and giving it a little bit of CPU time and then going to the next process, give it a little CPU time, go to the next process, a little bit of CPU time, and it's constantly doing that, okay? And so what we're doing is like, give this process just a little bit more CPU time, but the kernel is a final arbiter. It says, hey, I've got things that are important to do. I know that you think this is really important, but I'll try to get to it if I can. All right. All right, so let's move on. All right. Let's talk about killing a process. Let's do our PSAUX. Sometimes we have processes that are running out of control, okay? And we may want to have to kill them. So, for instance, if a process Let's take a look. Let's go top again. All right. And we got some process. And say we have a process that's just running out of control. All right. And for whatever reason, it's using up all my resources and it won't stop. Well, I have the kill command. I have several different types of kill that I can use, but the one that I'm going to show you is basically the kill 9. Kill 9 just gets rid of, stops any process. It's it doesn't allow the process to do any housekeeping, what have you. It just kills it like pulling the plug on your computer. All right. So let's say, for instance, let's go open up a process. Let's open up a web browser. All right. I thought we had a web browser open. Let's keep it right there. And let's say our web browser is causing us problems. Let's quit out of here and let's go PSAUX and let's go Firefox. I say maybe it's even, that's not what I wanted. I wanted grep Firefox. My bad. Grep Firefox. Okay, notice that what it did is it opened up Firefox because it says show the processes and then start Firefox, piped into Firefox. Now let's go ahead and we see all these processes and say we wanted to go ahead and kill one of these processes. We could go ahead and with the process ID, such as this right here, 2986, and we can go sudo kill -9, okay, and let's go and kill, was it 2986, and it killed that process. Let's run our processes again, and you'll see 2986 is gone, okay. But to get rid of the Firefox entirely, we want to get rid of the parent process. Let's try getting rid of that one right there. And 1375. All right. And now let's do, once again, let's go and look. 1375 should be gone. No more 1375 left. Or here's another example. Let's say that the Apache web server was running out of control. Let's clear my screen. Clear. All right. And let's go PSAUX or locked up, for instance. Not -AUX, but just AUX. Say my Apache web server locked up. Let's go and search for Apache 2. But I got to put the grep in there. And you can see that root has initiated it. Let's go and see if we can kill it. Let's go sudo kill 9, and the process ID is 2708. 2708. All right. So now let's go ahead and look at our processes. And we still got, looks like we have several instances running of Apache. Let's kill them all. All right, let's go 5791. And then try, let's get rid of them all. 5821. Let's go over here. Let's see if we can connect to our Apache server. It'll be 127.0.0.1. Looks like there's still some processes there associated with Apache. Yeah, it still is. So let's keep on, let's get rid of them all until there's none left. 5837. Let's go 5838. I meant 5838. 38. No, it looks like that one's not existent. Let's try our server again. And looks like have we killed it all? Maybe not. Let's keep on going. This raises another question about processes. Processes, when you start them with a system control, they really should be stopped with system control. So let's go system CTL. All right, system control. Stop Apache 2. And this is a much simpler and less harsh way of stopping a process. And now you can see that it stopped the Apache 2. All right. When I go ahead and, so now if I go ahead and restart it with system control, let's do that. We should be able to get back to our web server. Okay. And then let's go hit refresh and the web server is back up. All right. It's also kind of important to note, I'm going to clear my screen again. And let's go ahead and move this browser out of the way. That earlier when we were using Mousepad, all right, we've done Mousepad and say etc resolve list, right? It's wrong file. etc apt is what it should be. etc apt resolve list apt. Am I spelling it wrong? Hang on one second. Oh, my bad. I meant the sources list is what I meant. Sources. Sources. There we go. All right. So here's our Kali repository sources. Remember, we added the Ubuntu repository. But while we're working on this, right, notice what's happening over here. Okay. We don't have a command prompt. So as long as we have this text editor open, we can't enter anything over here at the command prompt. Now, it may be that that's not going to work for you. You could actually open up another terminal, but let's go ahead and close this, okay? Another way to handle this is to be able to open up a process and run it in the background. Run it in the background so that it doesn't take up all of your resources. Resource probably it doesn't use up your terminals. What I don't want you to do, I want you to run the process in the background and then give control back to the terminal, okay, to the individual user. And we can do that by let's try it again. Here's our command, right? And if we end it with a ampersand, like that, right? So we get both the text editor open and we get control over the terminal again. All right, so this works in, if we're running scripts that might take minutes, hours, days, and you don't want to have to wait until that script is done running before you can use the terminal again. So this basically runs it in the background, okay, so that you can go ahead and still use the terminal. It's a really useful command to use. All right, so just ending it with an ampersand is going to put it into the background. If we wanted to go ahead and bring it back into the foreground, it's going to be simply sudo fg foreground and then the process 5997, process ID 5997. And it doesn't like my command not found. Let's see. Did they change that in this new Linux? Let's find out and fix it. Oh, my bad. Okay, let's go. It does this. Just try with the ampersand in place. Command not found. Huh. Let's try FGH. Okay, there is an FG command. So let's just try without the sudo. Maybe that's what's throwing out FG and then 5997. No such job. Let's do a PS and see if there is a job like that. PS AUX should be. There it is right there. 5997. Sudo mousepad. Okay. Let's try it again. Foreground. No such job. Let's see what's wrong with this here. Things change. Okay. Still doesn't like it. Let's close this down. Looks like they've changed the foreground, background. Background seems to work fine. Foreground is where the issue comes up. Let's try running that mouse pad again. Okay. Putting in the background. You see that it's right there, 6045. All right. And then I want to foreground again. Let's try FG 6045. No such job. Let's see if we can get the right syntax here. Command not found. Okay. Then let's go man FG. Let's see how they've changed. There's no manual entry for FG. Let's go for the help screen for FG. Okay, move a job to the foreground. Place a job specified by job spec in the foreground, making it a current job if job spec is not present. So it's simply FG times the job spec. That's exactly the way it's supposed to be. Yet when I do it, it doesn't. It's not working for me. 6045. No such job. Let's go. Let's enter jobs. There's two of them. You see that right there. And then let's go foreground. And let's go. Let's take 2. There we go. Okay. The specification is not the process number, but the job number. Okay. And so that's where it wasn't working. They've changed it so it's the job number now and not the process number. So you see we've now moved sudo mousepad into the foreground from the background. All right, let's go ahead and close that down. And next, what I want to do is talk about how to schedule processes. So it used to be that there was a command called the at command, right, within Linux. There isn't anymore, but you can still get it from in the repository. So let's go see if we can find it in a repository. Let's go sudo apt cache search, and it's called at. Yep, my search is spelled wrong. And it finds a lot of them. I think the binary is actually called @q. Let's see if we can find that. No, I didn't find it. Let's see if we can download it. So sudo apt install at. Yeah, it's there. Okay. So if you're trying to use the at command on page 69, it's no longer in the Kali. So you can go ahead and download it. And we've got it all downloaded now. And we can go ahead and schedule processes then. So we can go say sudo, say, let's go 2320, 11:20 a.m., then hit enter. Hour too large for a.m. Oops, yeah, that's true. Let's make it 11:20 a.m. And then now I can go ahead and tell it what I want to be executed at 11:20 a.m. So maybe that's a new script that I've, let's see, at home, Kali, we'll call it just hacking script. All right. And then we'll hit enter. And we hit Control D, and there it is scheduled for tomorrow, the next 11:20. Okay. So you can see it's at Wednesday, April 21st at 11:20 a.m. We've got this hacking script scheduled. Notice that it didn't even check to see whether or not the script actually exists. But when it tries to run it tomorrow at 11:20, it'll throw an error, okay, because there's no hacking script there. We could put something in there, something like an nmap script or something like that. So let's do that. Let's create a a quick script. Let's go ahead and open up our mouse pad again. So we'll go sudo mouse pad, and we'll call it hacking script, like we said. There's our mouse pad, and we can create a quick script. Getting a little ahead of ourselves, we'll do scripting here, real like chapter 8. But in this case, we're going to just do, going to open it up with a shebang, and then tell it to do bin bash, and then we could run, say, nmap -st, and then google.com. Okay, and then save it. And then what will happen is at 11:20 tomorrow, it'll run this script and give us the results from our nmap scan on Google. Now we will create something a little more elaborate in tomorrow's class. We do some bash scripting, but this is the way that we could schedule it. So, I tell a story in the book about a famous hacker who is about to be released from prison, I think this month. His name is Max Vision, and he spent 14 years in prison. And so it's like 2007, is that right? Something like that. That he went to prison, and what he was doing is he was working as a infosec security professional in Silicon Valley back then, while running a hacking operation at night. And one of the things that he was doing was he figured out that all of these point of sale systems, Aloha point of sale systems, had a back door essentially at port 5505 that was set there for tech support. And so he figured that out. He knew that he could get in there and extract all of their credit card numbers and PII. So every night he would set up his machine to search the world by every IP address, looking for machines that had port 5505 open. So we could create a simple script that would do that and then present a report when, at the end of the period of time that it was done scanning, it says, okay, all of these IP addresses have port 5505 open. These might be places you want to go hack. So when we get into the bash scripting section, we'll take a look at that, how you can go ahead and create scripts like that. And then, of course, we could schedule it. Okay, so we could go ahead and schedule that script. Once again, say we wanted to do it at like 2 a.m., right? So we could set it up to do something like this. Let's go, let's make it 2 a.m. And then we want to run home, Kali, hacking script. Is that what we call the hacking script? Yeah. And then Control D. Control D. And now we've set that one up. They have two jobs running now, one at 11:20 and one at 2:20, both running these hacking scripts. And so this would be a way to go ahead and set up a job. Now, if you're an administrator of Linux, this is a way to set up jobs like, being able to rotate logs, or backups would be an excellent example. You can go ahead and run backups in the middle of the night every night to be able to make sure that everything's backed up. So we'll look later on, later in the class, on how to use cron jobs, which is also a way to schedule jobs. So those are two ways. The app is simple and quick and easy, but it doesn't have as much granularity, and it's not as If you have a lot of jobs, it's not as easy to work with. And if you have, so you want to set up jobs that run every Monday or every Saturday at 2 a.m. It's a little clunky to do that. Whereas cron jobs are designed for those types of jobs where you want to say, do a job on the first Saturday of the month at 2:20 a.m. You can do that. With app, it's a little more difficult to do. It's simple and easy if you want to do simple one job to do tomorrow or the next day, but you start doing more complex job specifications, then you want to use cron jobs. So, okay, well, that completes chapter 6. We're on track. We've got about 16 chapters to do, so we got about 1/3 done today. So we're going to call it good for today, and we're going to come back tomorrow. And tomorrow we're going to look at user environments and bash scripting. Okay, those are going to both going to be really important units. And then the next chapter after that is going to be file system and device storage management. So we got a lot of important things to do tomorrow. So hope you can make it tomorrow, and I will see you then. Good night.